Hi, everybody. Welcome to my jazzed up video presentation I have prepared for you guys today. So, just talking about my strategy for a second, I'm just going to discuss how the first chapter's introduction to the theater, which is also called, well, I hope I can pronounce this right, the Hollandse Schouwburg. I'm going to be showing how that's a bridge between the author's fiction and the chilling historical reality of the 1943 Amsterdam and how they lived and how the Nazis inverted the theater from a place of music and applause to a site of deportation and trauma. And I'm going to be talking about the symbolic witness as the of the Blackbird narrator of using it, and how its song serves as both a warning for the resistance and a sign of hope. And I think you should watch this because it's a case study in how to teach hard history. I think it shows how we can use a single street corner in Amsterdam to help our future students in the classroom understand global tragedy without losing sight of individual bravery. So I'm going to be starting this, and I hope you guys enjoy. Today is a deep dive into the world of Maria van Lieschert's work, titled Song of the Blackbird. We set foot in 1943 in an Amsterdam gripped by the silence of occupation. Our guide is an unlikely one, a blackbird. In this story, the bird's tune is a duality. Its song creates a sharp warning for the resistance and a flickering sign of hope for the oppressed. As the blackbird notes, it is often called on when hardship is having its way with someone. Over the next several minutes, we will follow that thread from the pages of fiction into the real world history of the Amsterdam Theatre. Diving into the book, we see the modern day protagonist, Annick, looking at a family heirloom, a print of a grand theatre. To her 21st century eyes, it's just art, a piece of family history to be admired for its technique. But on page 18, the narrative shifts. That's when her grandmother, looking at the art, looking at that same image, makes the art disappear. For the grandmother, this isn't a landmark, it's a site of trauma. This is where the cognitive dissonance begins. How can a place designed for creativity also be a place of processing and deportation? As we expand the story, we realize that for the survivors, the building itself is a failed promise. While Onyx hears the lines of a drawing, her grandmother still hears the heavy clanging of the theatre doors. Now, to understand the tragedy of the theatre, we have to first discuss its beauty. Before 1941, the Hollandia Schouwburg was the heartbeat of the Jardenbert, the Jewish quarter. It was a sanctuary of magic and shared stories. As seen in the book, it was a place defined by music and applause. Even as the shadows of war began to stretch across Europe, this building remained a cultural refuge. It was a space where the community gathered to see themselves reflected in art. For the people of Amsterdam, these velvet seats represented safety, tradition, and joy. It's vital that we see this before, this sanctuary of light, because it makes the after all the more haunting. This is where the Blackbird song starts, in a place built for life. By 1942, the sanctuary we saw on the last slide was gone. The Nazis didn't just occupy the building, they inverted its soul. They rebranded it the Jewish Schauber, the Jewish Theatre. At first, it seemed like a small mercy, a place where Jewish art could still exist, but this was the fouled promise. The Nazis didn't stop the art, they contained it. Forcing the community into this one specific building for entertainment, they were actually conditioning them to gather there. It made the eventual transformation into a deportation center seamless. The spotlights that once illuminated actors were now used to catalog human beings. And as we see in Emma's story, the theater was no longer a stage for dreams. but a processing center for nightmares. This soon brings us to the Umschlagplatz, the Nazi term for collection point. But to those inside, it was the heart of a profound cognitive dissonance. Think about the physical reality of this space. You are standing in a theater, a building designed for community and shared imagination, but you're surrounded by the cold silence of a prison. The architecture hasn't changed, but the failed promise to the building is now absolute. The spotlights that were meant to tell stories are now used to verify names on a deportation list. The grand balconies are no longer for applause. They are for guards watching over shipments of human beings. For our students, this is the hardest lesson, that even the most beautiful places can be hollowed out and used for horror if we stop seeing the humanity within them. In the shadows of this atrocity, we find a different kind of history, the geography of choice. Because the theatre was directly located across from a nursery, the resistance identified a literal gap in the Nazi machine. Every few minutes, a public tram would rattle down the center of the street. For exactly 10 seconds, the tram's bulk blocked the guard's line of sight between the two buildings. In those 10 seconds, hope turned and took a physical form: a laundry basket, a potato sack, or a hidden bundle. Resistance members smuggled hundreds of children out of the nursery, right under the noses of the SS. This is how we teach hard history, by not just looking at the darkness, but by finding the specific moments where individuals chose to be the light. One might ask, why the blackbird? In a world where humans were hunted and silenced, the bird became a symbolic witness. For the prisoners trapped inside the walls of the Skarbut, hearing a bird sing outside the window was a radical act of hope. It was proof, biological proof, that the Nazi New Order hadn't conquered everything. As previously read, the song is a thread that binds the past to the present. In this story, the song is a duality. For the resistance members waiting in the shadows for the Plantage Medellin, it was a warning that patrols were near. But for the families inside, it was a reminder that spring would eventually return. Hope in this context isn't a happy feeling. It is a stubborn courage to keep the music playing when the world goes quiet. We must conclude where the building ends, at the open sky. After the war, there was a debate about what to do with the Skarbut. It was decided that the building was too stained by the atrocities within its walls to ever host a play again, so they removed the roof. Today, the theatre is a hollowed out courtyard. There is no more script here, no more velvet seats, and no more failed promises. Opening the building to the elements made it become a place where the raw truth can finally breathe. As future teachers, our job is to be like that open roof. We have to create spaces where our students can sit with the hard history of a single street corner and find their own voice. The blackbird still flies over this courtyard, and that reminds us that even when the music stops, the song of resistance is ours to carry forward. They call me a witness, but I'm really a bridge, exclaims the blackbird. In the spring of 1943, the air in Amsterdam was heavy with a fear so quiet it felt like a held breath. From my perch on the roof of the Hollander Scharbuk, I saw the world divided by a single cobblestone street. To the resistance waiting in the shadows with laundry baskets and stolen registries, my song was a jagged edge. It was a warning, a sharp note that the 10-second window was closing and a patrol was turning the corner. But to the families pressed against the cold glass inside of that theatre, my song was something else entirely. To them, I was proof that the Nazi New Order hadn't managed to arrest the sky. I was the sole reminder that a world of green leaves still existed outside those grey, suffocating walls. In a place of magic that had been inverted into a site of trauma, I was the only performance left. The song is a thread. As long as a bird can sing above a prison, the prison hasn't won. So ask yourself, in a world that sometimes goes quiet, what is your song? Is it a warning for the brave or a promise for the weary? I want to thank all of you guys for listening. I really appreciate the support. I hope you enjoyed the British monologue narrator voice I tried to put on. I was inspired by those serious documentaries that you've all seen in the past with those scary British voices. But in all seriousness, I hope you really saw the importance of the Blackbird's voice. And I also want to give a shout out to Dr. Cordy. When I was about to turn this in for the first time, I thought this isn't really up to my standards. And I knew I could do better. And he allowed me to briefly spruce up my work. So I really appreciate his support and his flexibility. He is awesome, as you guys all know. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day and go Bobcats.